Welcome to AIMSweb. My name is Lisa Langell, and I will talk with you about a few fun ideas for motivating students when you're using AIMSweb. The first one is called a Growth Homerun. This is a baseball game where growth equals a home run on an individual student basis. It's ideal for students being progress monitored frequently, and each student works towards their own personal goal based upon rate of improvement. So for example, if the student is being progress monitored and their weekly rate of improvement needed to meet their goal is perhaps 1.0 words correct per minute, or choose whichever measure you like, or 1.5 ROI, or 1.8, 2.0, etc., you use this as the basis for this particular game. And each student, again, works towards their own personal goal. Each time the student makes his or her weekly ROI, they get to go to the next base. After they've been around 4 bases, they get a home run, and you can celebrate and reward that student's performance, acknowledge it, and so forth, however you see fit. Another idea is using AIMSweb for student-led conferences. I've observed this in the schools in which I've worked, and it really seems to help students and parents, as well as teachers, collaborate and develop relationships and celebrate performance based upon the student's data. First, for universal screening, you'll teach the student to read a basic report. Now, for the earlier grade students, it may simply be noticing that their data is going up and that they're meeting targets. As you work with older students, you may be able to explain to them basics about the average range and how they're performing in relationship to peers locally or nationally, and then talk about rates of improvements and their performance. Ideally, rather than simply just having the student interpret the report, they should be talking about their growth in relationship to the different things they've done in school to learn to read or write or spell or do math better than they were doing in the fall. Additionally, in the area of reading or maze, you'll be able to use the Langell measure score for further information about the student's performance. When you click on this link, it'll bring you to a Find a Book page that you and the student, or the parent and the student, can use together to determine which books are most appropriate reading level-wise, but also interest-wise. So students could pick certain books they're interested in, and you could use this as a motivator as well, or a reward for students to allow them to choose the materials they want to read most. For students who are being progress monitored, the same concept applies, where students can talk about their growth and the different things that they've been doing in the schools. Obviously, the level of complexity in which they're able to speak to this report grows as their reading grows and as their age and grade level increases. However, this is a great way to discuss with parents and teachers how students are performing, what's working, talk about certain periods that were maybe more difficult for them, how they're finding reading now, and perhaps even show a sample of how they're reading by having the student read during the conference for 1 minute. For younger students who may not always understand the full complexity of an AIMSweb graph, you can have them graph their own results each week by jotting down numbers from 0 to 40 or higher on a piece of paper and having them circle the score that they received each week. For example, perhaps this is an early literacy measure and you're circling the number of letters sounded out correctly each week. The student can do their own graphing, connect the dots. You can even use their favorite color that week, and it makes for a nice introduction to the concept of graphing. By the time students increase their skills, you can eventually transition over to the AIMSweb graphs. Another fun game is the game of growth, where you take your classroom or your grade level and separate it into 2 matched groups, or maybe 3 or 4, depending on the size. You then look at their fall scores for each group and average them. Take the winter scores and the spring scores, and then see what the total growth is for the year. You can play this game in a number of ways. For example, just comparing fall to fall performance across multiple groups. Then you can take your growth from fall to winter and either reward the group that got the most growth or the group that got the higher score, and then do the same thing for spring. Additionally, you could use an end-of-year challenge for the total growth and see which group made the most growth. Different rewards can be used in this particular game to celebrate that growth. For example, 10 minutes of extra recess, or the students get to pick the game of choice that they want to play for a few minutes in school, or perhaps a special note goes home to parents, or perhaps there's a celebration at the school, or however you want to play it, you can certainly do that. It's a lot of fun, and it gets kids motivated to learn, yet it preserves individual students' integrity, so that if you do have a student who's lower performing, everybody has the chance to participate. Additionally, another way that you could play this game is by adding up all the students' individual growth. So this especially is nice for students who may have more room to grow. So if you have a student who's lower performing in the beginning, instead of that bringing down the score, you can actually look at individual students' growth from fall to winter and winter to spring and add up the total number of words that everybody grew. And that can also be another variation on the theme. Another fun game is the game of growth by paired schools, or you could have a competition across your schools in your district. And I put a couple of names of different schools here, the teams that they decided to be on, and you can add up their total growth by fall, winter, or spring, or for the course of the year, and then see which schools have made the most growth over the course of the year. Again, there are variations on the theme that you can play with this, and I'm sure you can get really creative in your own schools about how to apply this idea, but it can be a lot of fun to motivate students and staff to see how their students are growing and celebrate those successes at the end of the benchmark period or end of the school year. These are just a few of the fun ideas that many schools use to motivate their students and staff to be successful with AIMSweb and have fun along the way. I hope this has been helpful for you. I wish you success and your students success. Have a wonderful day.